All right. Good morning. Happy Texas Constitutional Carry Day. It is September 1st, 2021. I'm Richard Hayes, joined by the brilliant Emily Taylor. Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, Richard.
Happy Constitutional Carry Day.
Happy Constitutional Carry Day. Did you leave your license to carry at home this morning?
It's in my car. I got options. But we're excited to talk to y'all today about Texas Constitutional Carry, answering your top questions. We had a broadcast on Saturday, and we didn't get to as many questions as we wanted to, so we knew we had to come back, answer these questions. That's what the meat and potatoes of this presentation is going to be. We're going to pull comments from the last show, and then we're going to spend a lot of time answering as many questions as we can, and I got them getting fed to me live right here. So if you have questions about Texas Constitutional Carry, please put them in the comments section below. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. So I'm very, very excited. There's a whole lot of material to go over, just kind of a bit of housekeeping in the comment section below. You know, this presentation is going to be about your top questions answered. This is not going to be all inclusive. So if you have questions about it, check out the description of this video. There's the Texas Constitutional Carry Guide there. If you want to learn all the nuances of Texas Constitutional Carry, check out one of the live events, uslawshield.com events, and that there you really get some education.
And Richard, don't forget, there are so many questions that there's actually going to be another one of these Facebook Live events at 11 a.m. Central Time on Friday. So
Yes.
If your question doesn't get answered today, tune back in Friday at 11 and get it in the chat, and we're going to do as much of this as possible and as much as y'all need.
Yes. So we're going to today answering your top questions. If you have questions, put them in the comment section. Share this video. Post it on your Facebook page. You know, if you know somebody that needs to learn a little bit about Texas Constitutional Carry, tag them. We want to make sure that we get the good guys staying on the right side of the law, as PJ said earlier in our introduction. So without further ado, let's kick this off, going over some of the top questions that we received from the last chat. Then we're going live. Emily, why don't you kick us off with what does Texas Constitutional Carry mean?
Yeah, constitutional carry just means the ability to carry a handgun without a license or permit from the government. It doesn't mean everyone can do it. It doesn't mean you can do it wherever you want. It just means this requirement that you go through the class, the licensing, all of that sort of governmental bureaucratic hoop has been removed for people who qualify. Carrying a handgun openly or concealed, openly in a holster, is now available without a license.
No, I mean, it's great. I mean, when the clock struck midnight last night, I mean, millions of folks in the state of Texas, law-abiding citizens, had their Second Amendment's rights restored and now can carry generally in public. So we're very excited.
Well, Richard, how does Texas constitutional carry apply to non-residents?
So, and that, I saw this on Facebook even. It's kind of a myth that Texas constitutional carry, like other constitutional carry states, only applies to Texas residents. That is not the case. You do not have to be a resident of the state of Texas. So long as you meet the other qualifications, you're not a prohibited person, etc. So long as you meet the qualifications of Texas constitutional carry, it doesn't matter where you're from. You could be from Oklahoma. You could be from California. You could have your family fleeing the state of New York. Yes, they too can engage in Texas constitutional carry. So you don't have to be a resident of the state of Texas. So how old, Em? That was a question. How old do you have to be to engage in Texas constitutional carry?
Yeah, Texas constitutional carry is available to anyone 21 years of age or older. Of course, people between the ages of 18 and 21 do have some other firearms rights in the state of Texas, but constitutional carry, hard and fast, once you hit the age of 21 and up, you can engage in constitutional carry.
Yeah, and for our folks who are 18 to 20, there are options to get a license to carry. So if you fall in that range, maybe you can engage in Texas constitutional carry, but maybe you could get your Texas license to carry and still carry in public.
Sure, but that's very limited. You've got to be military, you've got to be under an active protective order because you're a victim of domestic violence. It is fairly limited. But yes, really 21 is what we're talking about for constitutional carry, and that does mirror the licensing requirement.
Exactly.
For the most part.
So let's see. I'll talk about so the question we got. If I had a misdemeanor that's more than 5 years old, could I engage in Texas constitutional carry? It's not a straightforward answer, okay? And if you have questions about whether you're eligible or not, I mean, you really need to consult with an attorney. So members of U.S. Law Shield, you can call in, ask to speak to your independent program attorney. We will evaluate your specific set of circumstances because it's not straightforward. But generally, if you're not a prohibited person under federal law, not a prohibited person under Texas law, if your convictions are more than 5 years old, most of the time you will qualify. Okay. Now there's really one or misdemeanor that we're worried about, misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence. I mean, that would prohibit you for life under federal law. So that's a big no. But when it comes to Texas constitutional carry, we're really looking at 5 misdemeanors. We're looking at assault, terroristic threat, disorderly conduct, discharge or display, and deadly conduct. And so, if you've been convicted in one of those crimes in the previous 5 years, let's say there's nothing else going on, then you would be able to engage in Texas constitutional carry. And a good resource available, uslawshield.com/take the quiz. They have an eligibility kind of checklist. You go through, answer some questions, and it's kind of a preliminary screening. Can I constitutional carry? So check out that resource as well.
Yeah, but specifically, make sure look at that 5-year deadline, because just because you've got one of these misdemeanor convictions in your past, it does not mean you are forever prohibited. Wait, count down that clock 5 years from your conviction, you'll be good to go.
Yes, exactly right. So the next one that I want to talk about is how to carry under Texas constitutional carry. Can you give everybody a rundown of that, Em?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the big sort of internet rumors going on, is that constitutional carry is really only open carry. And there are lots of states in the country that actually do impose that requirement. If you're going to carry without a permit, it's got to be carried openly. But that's not what Texas did. In Texas, we said permitless carry, constitutional carry. You've really got 2 categories of options. You've got open, and if it's carried openly, it's got to be carried in a holster. Doesn't matter what kind of holster it is, commercially manufactured is a good idea. But as long as it is in a holster, it can be carried openly, and that's partially or wholly visible. So if any part of the gun is visible, it's considered open. But the other thing that you can choose to do is carry concealed. And if it's concealed, it does not have to be in a holster. Ladies, you could throw it in your bag. I talk to a lot of guys who want to just put it in their jacket pocket. Any way you want to keep it out of plain view, concealed. There is no other requirement. Just make sure that the weapon itself is not visible.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note. I mean, this is a significant law change because all references to shoulder and belt when it comes to holsters has been removed from all codes. So the holster requirement is simplified, and let your imagination run wild. So concealed anywhere, that's pretty easy. But when it comes to open, that could be a drop leg holster, a pilot or chest holster, or a backpack holster. I've seen some Molly, or I think that's what it's called, where it connects to like carrier plates or whatever. All of those are now on limits, whereas yesterday, they were not. You couldn't carry that way. That wouldn't be lawful.
Richard, why don't we talk about where people can constitutional carry?
Yeah, this is a big one. There's really a list of 14 places under state law, and then federal law, obviously, federal property, federal buildings off limits. We'll take that. But when it comes to our Texas places, this is a question we got about a lot last time. And so in order to find, and this is a list that constitutional carriers, I mean, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. And so whereas license holders, you go take your training class, you sign, they force feed it to you. You got to know these places. Texas constitutional carriers need to check out Texas Penal Code 4603 for our list of prohibited places. Now, a lot of these places are common sense. And so we got our 14 places. We'll start off with schools, okay? And when Texas uses the word, a premises, what we mean is a building or a portion of a building. So what we're talking about is typically the interior of a building. But when it comes to schools, we have the federal gun-free school zones law. So if you're only carrying under the authority of Texas constitutional carry, you got to stay away from schools. And absolutely, you cannot carry inside the buildings or in a location where a school-sponsored activity is taking place.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in before we get to more places, because this is something we touched on it last time, but it is confusing and it's complicated for people. You've got the interaction here between federal law and state law.
Mm-hmm.
State law saying anyone, constitutional carrier or LTC holder, could carry right up into the threshold of that school building. You can't carry inside, but you could carry right up to the front doors, kiss your baby on the forehead, send them in, and that would be fine. But it's the federal law that's really hurting constitutional carriers. The federal law saying if you're within 1,000 feet of a school, you cannot carry unless you fall into an exception. And that really common exception that people rely upon is having a license or permit to carry in the state in which the school sits. And so It's the federal law that's saying constitutional carriers cannot get within 1,000 feet of the school with that handgun, whereas LTC holders can. And it's an interaction again that's worth noting, even though we talked about it last time, because it's anytime federal law and state law sort of conflict, it gets a little complex.
Yeah, and important to note, I'm going to go ahead and go to a quick live question because it's worth noting now before we go any further. Ruben asks, what does this mean for LTC holders? Just a quick note. I mean, this program really is targeted for constitutional carriers, but as an LTC holder, if you carry the same way today and going forward as you did yesterday prior to September 1st, you're going to be just fine. Okay, the places that you had under 46035, under 4603 still exist. Your rights have just expanded as a license holder. So I just want to put that note out for license holders. Your rights have expanded. If you carry the same way, you're going to be just fine. But for the most part, when we're talking about these topics, we're really going to focus on constitutional carries. Great question, Ruben. And going back to schools, it comes up college campuses. That federal gun-free school zone law, like Emily was talking about, that doesn't apply to college campuses. And so a question we got last time is, how does this law interact with Texas constitutional carry? And the rule is that you are just now talking about the premises. So constitutional carriers, you're not carrying into the premises of a college building. So license holders, you might be able to carry in there so long as they haven't provided effective notice. But constitutional carriers, you cannot carry into the college campus buildings. That's a good point.
Mm.
Another prohibited place people need to know about: polling places on early voting or during an election. Courts, offices used by courts. We're going to go over the most common ones. 51% establishments. This is our bars. These are places that derive 51% or more of their income. It's derived from the consumption of alcohol on the premises. So you want to talk a little bit about that, Em?
Yeah, so this is one of these sort of interesting changes in the law that frankly may or may not have been intentional in the drafting of HB 1927, but we have 51% warnings, and you generally see these red 51% signs, and that's your notice that it is a felony to carry that handgun inside the bar. For LTC holders, and this is the way it has been and the way it will be going forward, when you see that sign, you're on notice. So let's imagine that an LTC holder goes into a place, they think it's a restaurant, they serve food, they don't realize it's actually 51% until they walk to the bathroom, and then that's the first place a 51% sign is posted. Well, now they're on notice. It's a felony to have that handgun. They've got to book it out to the car as fast as possible and disarm themselves. Constitutional carriers do not get that notice.
No.
And so it's really sort of a scary thing for constitutional carriers. You don't have to see a sign to be committing a felony as a constitutional carrier. So license holders actually get the benefit here of being warned that you're in a bar, whereas constitutional carriers, I mean, you better have a crystal ball for some places because you're committing a felony the second you walk in the door, even if there's no sign posted.
Right. And so going back to kind of our big long list, and we're not going to hit them all, so you need to go to the description of this video. The U.S. Law Shield Constitutional Carry Guide has a chart that breaks it all down. But just want to go over some more common places: hospitals, nursing facilities. We're going to talk about open government meetings, open governmental meetings. So these are in places, a lot of times those are held in schools or courts, which are already prohibited. But let's say it's at a city hall where it would otherwise be okay. Open meetings, that was a big debate this go around. So open meetings off limits, places of execution, that probably doesn't come up too much. Racetracks where pari-mutuel wagering is taking place, sporting events. So it's not a common sense list. License holders have had to commit these to memory for, decades now. It's something that constitutional carriers need to be aware of. Like I said, ignorance of law, not an excuse. Go to Texas Penal Code 4603, check out the Constitutional Carry Guide.
And, I'll add, Richard is talking about the things that are off limits under 4603 of the Penal Code. It's either going to be a felony or a Class A misdemeanor to carry inside these places. It's a very serious list. And we have this one category of places that as a constitutional carrier you cannot carry. But then there's another category of places, which is private businesses which choose to prohibit constitutional carriers.
Yeah, let's talk about signs.
Yeah. So, and that's really, so you've got to bear that in mind, is that you've got this discrepancy between places that the law says you cannot carry and then places where the property owners decided you cannot carry. The penalty is generally going to be lesser in those places, and you are going to be warned by sign, or you're going to be warned orally and personally, hey, you can't carry in here. But yeah, Richard, talk us through a little bit of The 30.05, our new creature of signs, and how
Right.
constitutional carriers get warning.
Right. And so for our constitutional carriers that are qualified, you're generally carrying in public, so streets, sidewalks, walking through the parks, that's all going to be fine, effective now. But if a private business wants to exclude someone, they absolutely can. And the standard is different than that of license holders. The license holders, they have some statutory requirements. They meet them. That's notice. That's not what we have for constitutional carriers. The standard is something that's reasonably likely to provide notice to the intruder, the person entering the premises, that entry with a handgun's prohibited. So it's kind of this nebulous phrase, and we have something in the penal code under Penal Code 30-5. That's where our general trespass statute lives. That looks a lot like 30-6 and 30-7, but it's really important to note it is not 30-6, 30-7, which apply to license holders. It is a completely different standard. So be on the lookout for no firearm signs, no weapon signs, no guns allowed, gun busters. Look out for those types of signs, because that could be providing effective notice excluding folks. And so generally, let's say I'm a constitutional carrier and I go to a gas station, they have that sign posted up. What that means is if I enter, that's what trespass is, entering in a place knowing that entry is forbidden, or remaining after you're being told to leave. We got two real forms of trespass. If I'm a constitutional carrier, I walk past that sign, it's a Class C misdemeanor, punishable by a fine up to $200. That mirrors 30-6, 30-7. And if somebody tells you to leave and you leave right away, unlike license holders, you can't uncommit the crime. So there's kind of it's a stiffer penalty for constitutional carriers. Be on the lookout for those signs. And I have to note, anytime, it doesn't matter whether you're carrying a gun or not. Anytime someone tells you to leave, you need to leave. Because if you hang around, it becomes a much more serious crime, a Class A misdemeanor. So you don't want to engage in that.
Yeah. And actually, there's one more sign that I think we should talk about
I was
going
to say, so Eric says, is the TABC blue sign, the handgun warning sign, is that going to be an increased penalty? It has the increased penalty for unlicensed carry. Great question, Eric.
Too funny. Eric read my mind.
Yes.
Because it's worth noting right now. Yes. So we see these, what we call blue signs, right? Which are the opposite of the red sign, right? Anytime someplace sells alcohol, TABC, you have to post either a blue or a red sign. And the red sign being, this is a bar. Blue sign, just, you sell alcohol. So we're talking about grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations, restaurants that don't derive more than 51% of their gross receipts from the on-site consumption of alcoholic beverages, right? So you're just general restaurants. These places that sell alcohol but aren't bars have historically had to post these blue signs. And these blue signs just put people on notice. If you don't have a license to carry that firearm, it is a stiffer penalty. It's a felony to carry inside rather than a Class A misdemeanor, which is your general unlawful carry. Now, these signs, as of this morning, my gosh, blue signs have been repealed. They are ineffective. They don't mean anything. And I guarantee that, restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, no one took their blue signs down at midnight last night.
No.
You're going to see them for quite some time, but they are absolutely ineffective. They've always been ineffective for license holders. They weren't talking about us, but they are ineffective for everyone now. They are repealed.
Yeah, and keeping on the theme of, excluding constitutional carriers, a question that we got last time is, can municipalities, can cities prohibit, the unlicensed carry? Can they post up 30-5 signs, the signs we were just talking about, and exclude constitutional carriers? And the technical answer is no, under Local Government Code 229.001. So they have, what we have in Texas is statutory preemption. Our law is supposed to be uniform throughout the state. Now, that's all to say, they aren't technically allowed to regulate the wearing and carrying of lawfully carried handguns under that section. However, license holders, you're familiar with this, that we ran into this problem. Really it started getting bad with open carry back in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
But open carry, our license holders, we have a provision of the government code that says, hey, if a government excludes a license holder under 411-209, then you have a remedy. There's a penalty for that county or city that's violating your carry rights, essentially. Interesting. We do not have that same kind of stick to motivate cities not to exclude constitutional carriers. So while it's considered null and void, and while you may not be prosecuted, I still think we'll see a chilling effect because there's no penalty to cities, and hopefully the legislature will clean that up in future sessions.
I sure hope so. Why don't we talk through, unless there's a live question?
Yeah, and so I wanted to talk about. We had a couple questions from license holders. I have Sherry says I have a license from New Jersey. Is there anything I need to do since I reside in Texas?
Sherry has a license from New Jersey.
Yeah, that
I-
is a feat in and of
That is
itself.
amazing.
So yeah, New Jersey is notorious for not issuing
Yeah.
licenses, so that's very, very exciting. I mean, I always encourage people to get their Texas license to carry, because one, you can't use that New Jersey license as a substitute for a background check if you're going to go buy a gun. Because we got that question from Karen as well. Is there any reason to renew my license? There are tons of reasons to keep your license to carry. One of them, just like I said with Sherry, fast lane for firearms purchases. You can use your Texas license to carry at a Texas FFL as a substitute to the NICS background check. And we saw that back when the pandemic first
Last
struck.
summer.
Yeah, the only people getting guns were Texas license to carry holders for a while, and so there are good reasons to, Sherry, get your Texas license to carry, to renew your Texas license to carry. What are some other benefits to getting your license to carry in?
Well, reciprocity is a great one.
Oh yeah.
And I know a lot of people might say, hey, there are 20 other states out there who have constitutional carry, so why would I worry about reciprocity for my handgun license? But the reality is that a lot of those states limit constitutional carry to their residents only. Also, you're not guaranteed that the state you want to visit is going to have constitutional carry. There are some states, even, Maine comes to mind, in which there is a version of constitutional carry. However, if you have a recognized license, you're allowed to carry more places than constitutional carriers.
Right.
So it is really important, if you travel outside the state of Texas, you want to keep that license for reciprocity purposes. Gosh, we have a million reasons. Keeping on travel, do you want to talk about airports? Because this is really important.
Yeah. So going back to that list of prohibited places where you can and cannot carry, one of them makes sense: secured portion of an airport. And it happens. I talk to these people. I talk to clients on pretty regularly who accidentally leave a handgun in a bag. They took it to the range one day, forgot it was in there. They're a bit frantic in the morning trying to get to the airport. And carrying into a secured portion of an airport is a crime under state law, and it's a civil penalty under federal law, and potentially a crime under federal law. We don't see it prosecuted that much. But for license holders, if you accidentally carry into a secured portion of an airport, you may have a defense to prosecution. The police, it's a bar to arrest. They have to let you go back to your car, take your gun. Hopefully you can catch your flight. Texas constitutional carriers, you do not get that same protection. You're going to get charged with a very serious crime and get hit with a gigantic TSA fine. So that's another great reason to have a Texas license to carry. Had a question from it looks like Catherine. What if I get pulled over in a school zone? So we have a lot of people. We have the Texas constitutional carry doctrine going. It's in effect now, but we have almost under I'll call it the castle doctrine, where you could carry in your car before. What are the benefits in having, let's say, a license to carry if you get pulled over in a school zone?
Well, first of all, you are not violating federal law, which is great.
Exactly.
And having a license to carry when you get pulled over under any circumstance is really important. I have something of a lead foot. I got pulled over last week, actually, for speeding down Nats Road 1.
Allegedly speeding down
Nats Road 1. Sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're looking at this, they get really mad about my speed. And, I know that when I hand over my license to carry with my driver's license, that the officer knows that he can be comfortable around me. I've had my background check. He knows I'm a documented good guy, essentially. I actually did get a warning from that constable last week. So maybe license carry related, maybe not. But it's important, if you don't have that license, and I think this is, this is a constitutional carry talk. You have a weapon on you. You don't have that license. This is a big point of confusion for people. You actually, as a constitutional carrier, don't have an affirmative duty to disclose the presence of that weapon to the officer. Unless asked, right? So if he says, okay, Miss Taylor, do you have any weapons in the car? Well, I need to tell him. I need to say, yes, my handgun's in my purse, or it's in my glove box. But, as licensed carry holders, we have that affirmative duty to hand over the license. But constitutional carriers, if you get pulled over, you don't have that license. You actually don't have to disclose that you've got weapons in the car until and unless you're asked.
Yeah. And just another benefit. That's how I like to think about it. You're a designated good guy when they see that license to carry. It's an instant background check. If the police pull you over, you hand your driver's license, you hand your license to carry. I mean, that should put law enforcement at ease. They know that you're not a criminal. You're one of the good guys, and so that's a huge benefit. Had in the chat they want some more clarification on college campuses. So let me talk about that very briefly. So going for our constitutional carriers, we talked about schools. That federal gun-free school zones law doesn't apply to college campuses. So we're not really operating with any kind of limitations from federal law when it comes to college campuses. So all we're focusing on for Texas constitutional carry purposes is the premises, the buildings or portions of buildings, the location where the school-sponsored activities are taking place, and then the transportation vehicles of the colleges and universities. So assuming that you're not in one of those places, you could, as a Texas constitutional carrier, carry on the grounds, streets, sidewalks, breezeways, areas around the college. Okay, but that threshold of the building, like Emily talked about, like dropping your kids off at school, that threshold of the building of the college premises, can't enter. So we wanted to provide some clarity there. Emily Earl asks, if you're in Texas from another state for work, you hold another state's driver's license, can you still carry under the authority of Texas constitutional carry?
Yeah, absolutely. So long as you otherwise qualify, right? All of those. And we'll go back to, if you're worried about whether or not you qualify, go to uslawshield.com/take-the-quiz. That's going to tell you, but we're talking about age, we're talking about federal disqualifications, and we're talking about those 5 misdemeanors essentially. So as long as you qualify, another state's license, totally fine. You are, if you get pulled over constitutional carrying and present that Oklahoma driver's license, you have nothing to fear under constitutional carry.
Yeah, and it's a good time to as a reminder, the description of this video, there's a Texas constitutional carry guide that goes into great detail on who can and cannot carry, where you can and cannot carry, what signs you need to be on the lookout for, why you should get a Texas license to carry. It goes into great detail. So make sure to check out the description below. And remember, like, comment, share, make sure to follow this page. We want the good guys to stay on the right side of the law. Maybe we can break the Facebook algorithm, get some positive gun news out there once in a while. Everything I see seems to be so negative. So make sure to share this video with folks. Jason asks, teachers with LTCs, can they keep their handguns in cars?
Oh, gosh. And that's another really good reason we're talking about why should I renew my LTC. So we have this issue that's been ongoing in the legislature for 3 sessions now, trying to protect ISD employees, right? Not just teachers, but any ISD employee who wants to keep their handgun in their vehicle. And so what we've landed on, and what is still the law today, September 1st, 2021, is LTC holders only who are employees of that ISD are allowed to keep a handgun concealed and in their locked vehicle in the employee parking lot. Constitutional carriers do not get that benefit. Constitutional carriers can be fired if they work for an ISD and they've got that handgun in the car
and charged under federal law.
Yeah, and there's no recourse. Whereas the LTC holder, not only are they abiding by federal law, but they can't be fired for that activity, which is a really great protection for anyone who works for an ISD. Also a really good reason to keep or renew that license or get it if you don't have it.
Right, Jason, great question. So ISD employees, a huge benefit to get your Texas license to carry. Arthur asks, what exactly do I need to know to carry? So just to summarize for folks, you may not have been here for the whole stream. 21 years or age or older. You don't have to be a resident of the state of Texas. If you have a clean criminal record, that means you've never been in trouble before, then you would qualify under Texas constitutional carry. That means you can carry concealed anywhere, on your person, on or about your person, bag, purse, boot, tucked under your shirt, or openly in a holster. So belt holster, shoulder holster, chest holster. The mind can go wild with the types of holsters that you can carry. Now, if you have some criminal exposure, and this is why it might be good to speak to an attorney to talk about your specific circumstances, because we're painting with very broad brushstrokes here. But if you have some criminal history, you may not be able to carry under Texas constitutional carry. If you're a prohibited person under federal law, you're not allowed to possess firearms or ammunition. So any of those questions on your ATF form 4473, if you have to answer yes affirmatively to any of those, you couldn't engage in Texas constitutional carry. If you're a prohibited person under Texas law, under 4604, that's where all our prohibited people live, excluding the motorcycle folks. But if you're convicted of assault causes bodily injury, family violence, under an active protective order, or you're a convicted felon. You can't engage in constitutional carry. And then let's talk about if you had a misdemeanor. You may have a misdemeanor, even conviction, and be allowed to engage in constitutional carry. But the 5 misdemeanors you really need to be on the lookout for: convictions for assault, terroristic threat, disorderly conduct, discharge or display, and deadly conduct. So be on the lookout. So that's kind of our quick summary.
Yeah, and there's actually another issue of how that we haven't touched upon, but I think we get questions about this a lot, which is, well, I mean, first of all, it's, what kind of handgun? And the answer is any kind of handgun.
Yeah. Does it have to be registered to me?
Yeah. Does it have to be registered? Absolutely not. There's no registry in Texas, so there's no issue there. My wife's handgun. Can I carry that? Absolutely. And also a question we get all the time is, loaded, one in the chamber. What are the rules? And the answer is, in Texas, there are no rules, right? I mean, you can have, carry with one in the chamber or not, whatever makes you comfortable, safety on, safety off. I mean, the world is your oyster, essentially. So that's a very free kind of how to carry that we do get questions on. I think it's important to note.
Yeah. So, and that's the misnomer. There's no gun registry. If your gun though is stolen, when somebody reports a lost or stolen gun, they put it into the NICS system, essentially under the lost or stolen property. They have a database, and so when police are running firearms, that's really what they're looking for: is this gun lost or stolen, or reported lost or stolen? So, if the gun is in if you're in lawful possession of the gun, it's going to be treated like it's your own. But yeah, that's a really, really important point. And if you have questions about whether you're eligible to carry under Texas constitutional carry, your circumstances, they may be a little bit more complicated. There's the Eligibility Quiz, uslawshield.com/take-the-quiz. Or, members, U.S. Law Shield members can call in and ask to speak to an independent program attorney. They'll give them a rundown, make sure that they are qualified to carry under Texas constitutional carry. So let's see. We got a lot of questions. Wow, they're rolling in so fast. Brian says to Emily, how does this affect first responders' ability to carry?
Yeah, so first responders, actually, we have, gosh, did we even make a change this session to first responders?
So we have the first responder bill, and yeah, we are focusing on constitutional carry, but a wave of new gun laws went into effect that are worth mentioning. So first responders, it hadn't changed too much. We have a new first responder law, but it lives next to our volunteer emergency services personnel.
Similar than it was before September 1st, as I recall.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it really hasn't changed for first responders. If your job lets you carry, great. If they don't want you to carry, then
and you've got to be on the job, right? That's the big issue for first responders is you can't just say, I'm a first responder, so I get to carry wherever I want. If you need to carry into a school, into an otherwise prohibited place, you do have to be actively working and on the job, and that has not changed.
Yeah, I'm going to go to this question from Daniel. Says, for those who live in a school zone and don't have an LTC, are they prohibited from carrying until they escape the school zone? No, so we have we talked about one of the big exceptions. One of the big exceptions to the federal gun-free school zone law is having a license or permit issued from the state in which the school zone is located. What is that in plain English? Texas license to carry, Texas school zone, good to go. But there are 8 exceptions to the Federal Gun-Free School Zones Act. And so one of those is your property, your house. So put Daniel at ease a little bit. So in your house, on your property, you're going to be just fine. If you're in a car and it's encased and traveling through, or if it's in a gun rack traveling through, there's lots of exceptions to each of these rules. This is just kind of the top questions.
And while Richard's filtering more questions, there's one that we got last time that came in several times, and I'll go ahead and address this last one on our list that we got at the last session, which is, can I engage in constitutional carry if I have a clinical diagnosis of mental illness? And so this is something people ask a lot, right? I mean, you've gone in, you're diagnosed with PTSD, maybe just depression, anxiety, things of that nature, and they worry, right? Is this something I need to disclose to the state? Mm-hmm. Does it stop me? And the answer is no. As long as, for the purposes of constitutional carry, as long as you have not been adjudicated mentally unfit, which is your federal law disqualification, right? You've been involuntarily committed to a mental institution, you've been placed under guardianship or conservatorship. I mean, a judge has actually ordered that you are mentally unsound. that's the Texas constitutional carry disqualifier, because that's the federal law disqualifier. So anything else, gosh, I've been diagnosed with anxiety or PTSD. None of that matters for the purposes of constitutional carry. It is, it's going to be confused, I think, a lot with the restrictions we have for getting your LTC in Texas, for which there are, several diagnoses where you're not going to be able to get your LTC, things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, intermittent explosive disorder. There are a couple more on the list, but for the purposes of Texas constitutional carry, we are looking at federal law only, and that federal law is a judge ordered that you are mentally unfit, and that is a very small number of people. So the answer to that is just a clinical diagnosis. Absolutely not. Does not stop you from constitutional carry.
Yeah. So are people who've been adjudicated. That's the key phrase. Adjudicated or involuntarily committed. That's when we're really talking about. If you don't fall into one of those two categories, you wouldn't be prohibited under federal law.
If a judge did it,
right.
basically, not a doctor, but a
right.
judge. So that's your key there.
Michael asked a good question. What about what training is available to new constitutional carriers? And I think we all agree, training with firearms extremely important. Everyone should be educated about not only the law, how to use their firearms. You go to the range, you practice, but do you practice what the law is? Do you practice what you would do if you were involved in a self-defense incident? So there's a lot of training available. The DPS has a free online course. There's lots of if you don't have a local gun shop that you go to, I would get in, build in your network, talk to those people. I'm sure they're offering training. U.S. Law Shield. I do presentations on what to do after you have to shoot somebody in self-defense, or just what are the laws, where you can and can't carry. So there's a lot of options out there.
Gunlawseminar.com is a great one for just your educational resources, and that's through U.S. Law Shield. But yes, your local and your mom and pop gun store, you want to support them. You want to support the guys who are teaching the licensing classes. They're also going to be teaching your basic tactical courses. They're so important. Every round, if you are forced to defend yourself with that weapon, every bullet that comes out of your barrel has dollar signs and lawyers attached to it. And you have to know what you're doing, not just legally, but also tactically.
No, that's exactly right. Like I think it needs to be emphasized. If you go and you practice at the range, what happens if you're forced to defend yourself? I think a lot of people in Texas forget, and we're going to have a lot of new gun owners. A lot of people forget that self-defense, defense of property, defense of others, all these defenses are defenses to crimes. They're defenses to crimes, and they're justifications to otherwise criminal behavior. So if you, general, can't shoot people, can't point guns at people, can't run people over with your car, broad brushstrokes here. But sometimes it's okay. If you're fighting for your life, it's a last resort. You're acting in self-defense. You're defending somebody else. But I think a lot of people forget that you get charged a lot of times, put through the system. It's in, when it's captured on video, like a Jack Wilson case, clean cut, but what if it's not captured on video? What if there aren't corroborating witnesses? It gets dragged out, and what is a jury going to do at the end of the day? And so I think that's an important reminder.
And I'll say, Richard and I, we represent real people who have had to defend themselves, others. They're charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. They're charged with murder. We have lots and lots of clients, unfortunately, charged with murder for having to have defended themselves or others. And I know that when I stand up in front of that jury and I'm talking to my client on the stand and I'm talking to the jury, I want them to know that my client has taken it upon themselves to get training, either through getting an LTC, or if not, if they are a constitutional carrier, through classes on how to shoot and through classes on knowing the law, because you want the jurors to understand that the client you have that shot someone is a responsible person, a responsible member of society who did their best to know the law and to know how to use that weapon before they had to or were forced into that incident.
Yeah. And so going back to, and you'll hear this from some instructors, the LTC class is not where you learn how to shoot a gun, but I guarantee you that same instructor teaches a basic handgun class. And so go in and get the training. Can't recommend it enough. I got a question from Jesse. If you were arrested in the past for a felony, but all charges were dismissed, could you constitutional carry?
Yeah. So actually, I love this because constitutional carry opens this up to, of course, if your charges were dismissed or no billed, you don't have to worry. You are not a convicted felon. But people who were placed on deferred adjudication for felony offenses, they have to wait 10 years before they can get their license to carry. For some felonies, it's a permanent bar. Even though you're not a convicted felon, you were placed on deferred adjudication and your charge is ultimately dismissed. Constitutional carry has no such bar. So, in fact, I talked to somebody who called in last week. He had been placed on a deferred for a disqualifying crime. It was years and years and years ago, but it was burglary of a habitation. He was very, very young. And, I had to tell him, look, you're forever prohibited from getting your license to carry. But next Wednesday, you can constitutional carry because there is absolutely no bar from that dismissed felony. It is your 2A is open as of today.
Yes. And the same question from Leslie, and I think you covered it. So good answer there. Justin says, where can I find the actually updated gun laws? Ooh, I got some bad news for you, Justin. So if you go on the Texas Legislative Office, they have all of our Texas statutes published. And if you look up, what we've been talking about today is Texas Penal Code 4602, 4603, and 4604. Where what's the prohibited conduct of carrying under the authority of constitutional carry 4602, prohibited places 4603, prohibited people under 4604. And I'd like to say, hey, the government is, lickety split, and they've updated the law and they've incorporated HB 1927. And as of this morning, it hadn't been updated yet. If you look up those laws now, there'll just be a note above it that says, hey, these are affected by HB 1927 and some of the other gun laws. So where to find the law? One, make sure to check the description of this video. Get the guide that really goes over the meat and potatoes of what you need to know about Texas constitutional carry. Also, we are, finalizing the Texas Armed and Educated book that has everything. I mean, it's like the Texas Gun Law Bible, and so that will be available. I think it'll be available in the next couple of weeks, so before the end of the year for sure. But that's where you can find the gun laws.
Yeah, and just we actually, as an office, did reach out to the Legislative Council for for the legislature, and we're told that it would be ready sometime in the fall. So, Justin, sometime in the fall is when the government will have that new code ready for you. We are as eager to see it as you are.
So just Christian asks, I have an LTC, so can I ignore the 30-06 and 30-7 signs? I'm confused. And this is, I love this question because it's confusing. So license holders, if you're carrying under the authority of subchapter H 411 of the government code, 30-06 and 30-7, 51% signs, 4603 signs. Those are the signs you need to be paying attention to, okay? So those 30-06, 30-7 signs, those still apply to you. And the question we kept getting is, hey, what if, because I'm sure, like Emily said, I'm sure they didn't go up and update their signs last night right at midnight. What if you're walking into a gas station and they just have 30-06 and 30-7? It makes it sound like constitutional carriers have more rights than license holders. And as confusing as the law may be, the answer is license holder, you're excluded, and constitutional carriers, you could carry into that location. But I think I have a workaround for you. Just leave your license to carry in the car, because then you're carrying under the authority of Texas constitutional carry, not carrying under the authority of your license at that point, and those signs would not apply to you.
Right. And, the reasoning behind that, just for everyone who's like, what? I can just become a constitutional carrier? We have to, as license holders, have physical possession of that license in order to be carrying under subchapter H, chapter 411 government code, right?
Yeah.
We have to have it with us. If you don't have it with you, you are now a constitutional carrier. You're not carrying under the authority of your license. You want to go turn around, put it in the car, and walk past 30-06, 30-7, as long as there are no other signs. I think that that's a good legal argument that you have done nothing wrong.
Yeah. One last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. So Joe asked, can a constitutional carry person, someone who would constitutionally carry, be a member of U.S. Law Shield? The answer is yes. I speak to members all the time who don't have a license to carry legal weapons. That's what Law Shield is concerned about. So absolutely, constitutional carriers could join U.S. Law Shield. And so I just want to say, great talking with you, Emily.
Yeah, no, Richard. Happy Constitutional Carry Day again.
Yeah.
Let's go carry. Let's
get
out there.
Exactly right. And to everyone, I would just want to thank you so much for your questions. Wonderful questions. Happy Constitutional Carry Day. Remember those resources in the description. Take the quiz, see if you're eligible. Get the Constitutional Carry Guide. Go to a live seminar if you want to know, if you really want to get into the nuances of constitutional carry. So go check out the events page. Like this video, share it. Keep leaving your questions. We read all your comments, and so good, bad, and ugly. So we read them all. And we're going to be doing another one of these presentations, 11 a.m.